And we should take heart, because it's not just us that's feeling like this. Right across the continent, people are feeling like this. The last poll from an outfit called Eurobarometer, who do the polling for the European Commission, the last poll that was out a few months ago showed that less than 50% of all the people polled across 27 member states, including many countries who are receiving the most incredible sums of money into them, that less than 50% now of people think the EU is a good thing. Think on this. Only 2 countries were given a referendum on whether they should join the euro or not. Denmark and Sweden. And they both said no. Only 1 country was given a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty. That was Ireland. And they said no. Until they were bullied mercilessly into voting yes a second time round. And the poor French and Dutch, who both voted no to the EU constitution, were just cynically, totally ignored by their own governments. Now, I am pretty cheesed off, not with the European Union particularly, because actually, if you look at the Treaty of Rome, if you listen to Mr. Barroso, if you listen to my mate Rumpy Pumpy, we get on terribly well, believe you me. If you listen to any of these people, actually, they don't hide the truth. Because they're talking about the EU becoming a new global superpower. Now, you know, I think it's water-nitty stuff. I wonder what they're drinking half the time and perhaps would like some of it. But at least they're open and honest about it. Though the people that I'm angry with are virtually an entire generation of British politicians who have consistently told a complete, total pack of lies. And I'm sorry to say, none more so than Cast Iron Dave. You know, I give you this cast iron guarantee, he wrote in the Sun newspaper. I'm sure you all take the Sun newspaper. And he said, I give you this cast iron guarantee that if I'm elected Prime Minister, the British people will have a referendum on the treaty. And he hasn't done it, has he? He's been elected as a Prime Minister, promising to be a Eurosceptic. Since he's come to power, he has, as I mentioned earlier, given away all regulatory control of Britain's biggest industry. He has, since he came to power, accepted the principle of an EU foreign policy, and he has, since he came to power, agreed that we should shell out yet more of our money. It's now 48 million quid a day is the membership fee that we pay this club, and that we should continue to shell out this money to an organisation whose accounts have not been signed off by the auditors for the last 15 years in a row. I mean, that, I'm afraid, is what Mr. Cameron has done. And much as I, on a personal level, quite like David, he's a very pleasant, nice fella to have a drink with and to be with, he's done what every British Prime Minister, be they Labour or Conservative, have done for the last few years. You know, he's gone along with this emerging EU state, and frankly, he's not to be trusted on this issue. Sometimes people say, well, Nigel, surely, if all the politicians agree, they must be right. You know, I mean, you know, you must be whistling in the wind. Because if all the politicians agree, then, you know, there are a lot of very clever people there, and you must be, and, you know, you've got to have got it wrong. Just remember, folks, this sort of thing has often happened before. Back in the 1930s, and this is an inconvenient truth that very few people like to talk about, but back in the 1930s, all 3 major political parties, the King, for a period of time, virtually the entire British aristocracy, and most certainly the BBC, and every single British newspaper, apart from Beaverbrook, who owned the Express, all of those people thought Hitler was a very good bloke. Now, I mean, I'm sure half of you don't believe me, but I'm being serious with you. They all thought Hitler was a good bloke. You know, Noel Coward made the humorous song, "Don't Let's Be Beastly to the Germans." And what Coward was doing was taking the mickey out of the entire political establishment in Britain. But they all thought Hitler was a good guy, and what we ought to do is turn a blind eye to the fact that he was now building up a German Navy and a German Air Force. And yes, he wasn't being very nice to the Jews, but there's no need to worry about that. Let's just not discuss it. Let's brush it under the carpet. We don't want to cause offence. And of course that was when we had the policy as you know, of appeasement. But literally the entire political class agreed. And there was only one person who was prepared to make a stand against it and to say that Britain must rearm, and to say that Hitler posed the most enormous threat, not just to us, but to the world, and that was Winston Churchill. And Churchill led, in the House of Commons, a small band of about 25 backbench MPs, mostly Conservative, but there were some Labour people in there as well, and they campaigned right through the 1930s to try and expose the flaws of Baldwin's policy, of Chamberlain's policy, of what everybody was saying, and they were derided, they were lampooned, they were described as warmongers, as nutcases, as lunatics, but thankfully they kept their campaign up, and not long after Munich, the country woke up to the fact that Churchill had a point. If it hadn't been for Churchill and 25 brave souls, we probably wouldn't have had any Spitfires at all in September 1939. Churchill was right, and the entire political establishment was wrong. And I think this time round, my own view is that we're right, and that the entire establishment is wrong. But in a sense, what I think doesn't really matter. Because what I want above all is I want there to be, in this country, a free and a fair referendum. So that we can decide whether we want to be a part of this new European project, or whether we want to take back our independence, our self-government, our democracy, and as I would put it, our pride, and whether we want to recalibrate the British economy and the British country, and take us away from being a European country. We're not a European country. We're a global trading nation with the most fantastic advantages of language, with the most incredible relationships, especially through the Commonwealth, with nearly a third of the population of the earth. You know, what I'm looking for, what I'll fight for, as and when we get that campaign, I won't be fighting a backwards-looking, idea that somehow we should return to the 1950s and take back the empire. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, in a modern global economy, we need to be flexible, we need to be adaptable, we need to have a much, much lower level of regulation, especially on Britain's 3.5 billion small businesses. And in the 21st century, we have to be able to forge our own links and have our own deals across the globe, and not have them made for us by people like Peter Mandelson and the European Commission. So that's what I'm fighting for. We are doing everything we can in UKIP to take votes on the establishment. Doesn't always make us popular, and after all, we turn up from nowhere and tell the British people that this lot have told you a pack of lies for 35 years. I mean, they're not always going to be nice about us, but I would suggest to you that we are beginning to make some progress. I mean, okay, I know that European elections are contested on the basis of proportional representation, and I know that the European issue is salient in those elections, but I still think that for UKIP, a party that had been going for less than 15 years, for us in 2009 to have come second across the entire United Kingdom in the European elections was one hell of an achievement, and the kind of thing that's never been seen before in British politics. And I think in the last general election, I have to say, I don't think UKIP fought the best general election campaign it could have done. But despite that, still 1 million people, still 50% more than last time round, turned out and voted for us. And from what I can see, from local council by-election results week after week, the level of support for our party is growing. And it's not just people on the right, there are people on the left too that will come out and vote UKIP, because they say this question of whether we govern ourselves matters much more than any other single political issue that we face in our country. So I've put my hat back in the ring to be leader of UKIP again. I did enjoy Lord Pearson of Rannoch's resignation statement when he said he was simply no damn good at it and he was going to retire back to his estate in Scotland. I mean, honesty like that is really rather good. My hat is back in the ring, and I am hopeful, I'm optimistic that next Friday I will get the chance to lead UKIP again, and I will campaign for us to have a referendum. I will campaign for us to be a free country. I will campaign for us to have aircraft on our 2 carriers. I will campaign for us to have longer and tougher criminal sentences for repeat offenders. And I will campaign for us to have less government. You know, if you want to smoke a cigarette in your local pub, and I do, if you want to go and hunt foxes, that's your business. That's for you and your conscience to determine. It shouldn't be for government to make those decisions. So they're the things that I'm fighting for. And I remind myself that the last time there was an attempt to force different countries in Europe with different cultures, religions, races, tribes and languages, the last time there was an attempt to force them all together without ever asking them whether they wanted to do it or not, and it was done in the name of peace. That project was started in 1920, and that country was called Yugoslavia. Because the great brains post-Versailles decided that the First World War had been caused by all these little warring states in the Balkans. So if you gave them one flag, and if you gave them one anthem, and if you gave them one foreign policy, and one agricultural policy, and one army, if you did all of that and called them Yugoslavia, there'd be no more war in the Balkans. Well, in your lifetimes, we've seen things like the Srebrenica massacre. In your lifetime, we've seen the ugliest civil wars that Europe has seen for 65 years as those individual groups of people fight to get back their own identities and their rights to self-government. You may say that it's an unpleasant, uncomfortable example, but it's a truism that people will not have imposed upon them another identity to the one that they in their hearts feel themselves to be. And I believe the people of this country want to stay British, and the people of Germany actually want to have their modern day democracy, and the people of France most definitely want to stay French and do things their way. So that's my crusade, that's my campaign, that's what I've dedicated over a decade of my life towards, and I'd be very happy to take any questions or criticisms or insults you wish to hear. Thank you.